Hello and welcome everyone to the CNBC Africa special with myself, Fifi Peters. As we all know, October is a Transport Month and the theme for today's webinar is Smart Mobility and Smart Cities. We are going to explore quite a number of innovative transport solutions that will lead to the benefits on various levels from social and economic to environmental and spatial development. Before I do introduce you to the panel of guests that will help drive this conversation today, let's take a look at a short background on the role of the Gautrain specifically in fostering smart mobility.
Smart mobility is an innovative way of getting around. It is the use of various transport modes that are smarter, cleaner, safer, and integrated, and that moves people, goods, and services more efficiently. It promotes sustainable mobility and is coupled with numerous urban, social, economic, and environmental benefits. It is about using technology to respond to the modern commuter's needs, such as convenience, access to information at all times, a high-tech adoption rate, time and cost savings, and of course, environmental consciousness. Critical to Gautrain's mandate is to ensure that it is sustainable as a public transport mode with clear commitment to the government's economic objectives, and that it integrates with other transport services. It also has to facilitate radical socio-economic growth and be environmentally conscious. The Gautrain wants to go fully green, and its sustainable urban mobility plan will include buses that run on electric, hydrogen or hybrid power. Among the social and economic benefits of rolling out the full Gauteng Rapid Rail integrated network extensions is that workers will have more access to employment opportunities. In terms of spatial development benefits of the Gautrain is an increased demand for residential property surrounding stations. This increases the rates revenue of municipalities and reduces the cost of providing basic services. This in turn leads to savings to the state, households, and the environment.
Well, joining me now to drive this conversation forward is Tshepo Kgabe, Chief Operating Officer at the Gauteng Management Agency, Kevin Pillay, CEO of Siemens Mobility South Africa, Dr. Mateta Mokonyama, Impact Area Manager for Transport Systems and Operations at the CSIR, and Thembani Moyo from the Faculty of Engineering and the Built Environment Department of Urban and Regional Planning at UJ. And as always, I really look forward to a further engagement from you, our audience. Feel free at any moment to send through some of the questions that you have for the panelists up on your screen. Gentlemen, good afternoon to you all.
Good afternoon, Fifi.
All right.
Good afternoon, Fifi.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Let's get the conversation going. And Tshepo, just to begin with you, we have seen a sneak peek of what the Gauteng Management Agency and the broader Gautrain is doing with the province as part of its 10-year plan to grow the province together. But perhaps you can bring us up to speed with that plan and the vision, how it's going regarding smart mobility and, of course, the pillars that will actually make it effective.
Thank you, Fifi, and thank you to all the listeners that are out there, and thank you for all the panelists for joining us. I think what becomes important in this space is for us to define first, what is smart mobility? And we've defined it as an effective and efficient mobility system utilizing appropriate technology. And in doing so, what we've done is we've fettered how we intend doing this as a whole. So as part of the way we're going to do things in Gauteng, we've developed a strategy called Growing Gauteng Together Through Smart Mobility. And the MEC will be speaking more about this in the coming week as he launches the strategy and at the Smart Mobility Conference in the coming week, as I said. Now, smart mobility to us is about having a transport system that catalyzes our economic growth. And our economic growth as a whole then has 4 pillars to it. So first and foremost is we need to restructure the urban landform. And when talking about the restructuring of the urban landform is making sure that all the areas of Gauteng and the global city region are all interconnected. And from there, that's where you see things like the Gautrain fitting in, the BRTs that we have, and an integrated mobile and app solution that functions very well. In addition to that, we've got Gauteng as a freight logistics hub. And freight logistics hub is, to remind everybody, 70% of everything that gets shipped out of the country or out of SADC or going into SADC goes through this province. And we want to enable an environment where that we find benefit in all that logistics and freight going through the province itself. And then we have the idea of a data-centric mobility. And in data-centric mobility, what we're now talking about is how do we bring apps that are useful? How do we bring an integrated, an intelligent transport system that functions properly? But you can't do all of this without having a knowledgeable state and a capable workforce that is underpins the entire thing. And therefore, the fourth pillar for us became building a strong institutions in and around what we need to do. And in looking at all of this, you have to ask yourself is, where does everything fit in? So if you look at, the intelligent transport system, you gotta make sure that everything combines together. And as everything combines together and integrates together, then how do you bring, that together? We are building a smart mobility center or a transport management center, as they refer to it. Behind that sits an incredible platform or an API that will enable the centralizing of data and information that you need. And with that, we then add integrated ticketing. And we're not only going after integrated ticketing, but we're going after the latest technologies of account-based ticketing. And when you look at the Gautrain, you can already see that we've already implemented account-based ticketing in full. And then behind that will sit the smart apps and websites. And then there's the issue of green mobility. And in and around green mobility is, as you saw on the video, we are at the current moment looking at introducing electric buses. And with the electric buses, we have to think about what do the electric buses become in the future. And we already have a sustainable urban mobility plan that talks to not only what we could do today with electrical buses, but how do we change the entire ecosystem to be able to have that zero emissions mobility. When talking about zero emission mobility, we're talking about people driving smart cars and having charging stations at the Gautrain, and then using the Gautrain, and then using smart buses as the last mile service. And with that comes the idea that you need to have a very strong telecommunications backbone to support all of this. Okay. But before we get there, we actually have to look at something. And what I refer to as the shapers of change. What is driving us towards this direction? So first is we're all talking about digitization. But behind digitization sits the idea of hyperconnectivity. And hyperconnectivity changes everything, because when you look at it, it's not just about digitizing in pockets. It's about us interconnecting everything else. And then could you actually use smart mobility to create resilient cities and resilient provinces? And then with that, could we actually democratize technology and create a new socio-economic context that actually does away with the challenges of having that do away with poverty and bring poverty alleviation as a whole.
All right. Okay. Tsepo, thanks so much for kicking off the conversation, really giving us a mouthful there. And I think at the center of the argument that you were making there is we're talking about this transport system that will ultimately catalyze economic growth. And just to give the rest of the panel an opportunity to comment on the broader plan for the province by way of smart mobility. But Timbani, as you also perhaps share your thoughts on that plan, for you have said previously that so far we are going in the right direction in terms of South Africa's move towards smart mobility, looking at what we have been able to achieve with the Gautrain and also the bus rapid transport system. My question then to you is that can the pace or should the pace be moved faster than it currently is going, or is everything okay at this stage?
Good afternoon, Fifi. Yes, as per our discussion earlier, I would say that currently the pace we're moving at is fine, because since in South Africa or the developing world, this thing of information technology is still a new aspect, and we still have to lay out the infrastructure. So first of all, I think there's still a lot of work to be done with laying out the infrastructure. That is, do we have enough information to actually support smart mobility? Are the people actually educated, or is there an ideological change that will actually push people to actually embrace it? Because as you know, like for the city of Johannesburg, we've got new cycling lanes which are there, but currently not many people are actually utilizing them. So there is a need for hence a form of having new communities where people are educated, and such platforms such as this that we've got today will actually be the stepping stone for such things.
Okay, so we are on track, according to you, Tembani. Dr. Mokonyama, to bring you in here, because you have said that the departure point when we are discussing smart mobility should be what Tepo did highlight earlier in his opening statement, that of an integrated transport system. And you believe that we shouldn't, as South Africa, underestimate the importance of this integrated transport network. How would you describe our current landscape right now, and how close or far are we from the ideal level of integration in terms of our network?
Thanks, Fifi. You know, like what Tsepo said earlier, perhaps a good place to start is with the definitions. I believe a smart city, in the context of this discussion, is a city that frees the potential, of everyone, like what the Constitution says. It needs to free. So the transport system that is there to unlock that, and it must not be supply driven. Often, as engineers and technologists, we tend to be supply driven. We need to have a social compact, and agree on what success looks like in space, in the built environment. And you want to have your communities even defend the plans that you have, because they own them. You don't want to force those to them. And once you see what freeing the potential means, there is no way that you will go against it, because everybody wants to live in a prosperous society. I think just to conclude here, networks, yes, networks can definitely free the potential of businesses. It can free the potential of households and individuals if properly designed. And based on the work that we have done, what we have shown, I think, unlike what Mr. Moyo is saying there about the pace and direction, we're actually moving backwards based on the numbers that we have. The pace at which we are moving is far slower than the rate of change that is happening in the opposite direction of policy.
Oh, interesting view there, and a very, I think, a welcomed level of conflict in that argument. And I suppose, Kevin, I'll get you to perhaps be the decider here, not only on the pace, but also broadly on smart mobility in a South African context as you see it. And I think that the panel has opened up the topic of integration and also the infrastructure that needs to follow. And your thoughts on the infrastructure that is currently taking place right now, and how South Africa is looking at the digital mapping of its transport network. I mean, are we on track here, or are there areas of improvement that you see we can achieve?
Yeah, thank you very much. Firstly, I must say that it's a welcome discussion, and it's a topic that I'm very passionate about. It's a topic that I think we're very excited about. It's a very good change to talk about the future and not to procrastinate on the past in the sense of smart mobility or the future of building cities. And in that regard, I must say my opinion here is, if I look at what the world is doing, we are behind, and we are going to lag more if we don't put in a tremendous effort now. in terms of and what we need to think about to add on to the smart mobility, this is a revolutionized thinking. It's a thinking where you say the past planning and what we did in the past and build infrastructure and build products and then lived around it is not working anymore. We don't have space. We don't have real estate. We don't have ability to put in the right technology because the older infrastructure is holding us back quite a bit in our transport system, for example. So as a result of that, combined with the effect that, for example, cars, combustion engines are starting to be done away in a lot of cities from 2025. That's 5 years down the line. So that's the same thing that's going to come to us. That trend is going to come to us. No more diesel, no more petrol cars. And we have to replace this with a smart, intelligent infrastructure system. I think to look at the topics of whether the current system is integrated, we are far from that because the system itself, for it to be integrated, you need good intelligent infrastructure, you need connectivity, you need to use data. You need to use data so you know what people are doing and you know what is the sense of the infrastructure and the facilities to move people. And by getting both of them to talk, you can address demand in an efficient way. I also think, from a socioeconomic perspective, we have little choice. This is the way to go. It will alleviate some of the road accidents we have. We are using and spending a lot of money. I think it was like a quoted figure was 160 billion rand a year on road accidents. South Africa has about 1 million road accidents. This is not stopping. And if you're looking at the forecast, for example, what Gautrain has published in a report, I think it was in 2019, the population in Gauteng province is going to grow to about 18.7 million in 2037. That's probably an increase of 4 to 5 million people. And with that, what it means is basically the number of cars on the road will double. We cannot build infrastructure efficient and fast enough to support it. There is no other option. Smart mobility has to happen, and it has to happen with speed now.
Okay, but it's quite concerning that it seems that the general view right now is regarding our smart mobility plan. We are not on track. We are behind with what the rest of the world is doing. Tapo, just to weigh in here, and suppose the natural question then would be how do we keep up with the A team, as it were, who are getting smart mobility right?
Not to be a contrarian, Fifi, I don't see a challenge in where we are. I actually see an opportunity. There was a study published by the UITP about, I think it was in 2015. And it showed that the countries that are lagging behind actually have an opportunity to actually right the wrongs of what had happened and how things have been implemented wrongly by other people in doing smart mobility. Now, there's a window of opportunity. I'm not saying we are on the right track. I'm just simply saying there's a window of opportunity that actually will allow us to be able to leapfrog the rest of the countries that are sort of in the middle and join the big leagues of the Hong Kongs and everybody else who's doing very well. But first and foremost, we need to be able to look at three things. So in integration, and in looking at integration, you look at three things: the physical integration of the different systems, the modal integration of the different transport systems, and the technology integration of the different transport systems. When people start talking about smart mobility, they default to the technology level. And by doing so, you forget that in most cases, our biggest problem is actually modal integration. Can this part of the public transport integrate with that other part? And then there's physical integration. So what we've done in Sandton Station, where you've got taxis, buses, and trains in the same building, has to be the norm. And that is part of integration itself. But we have an opportunity to actually be able to build this right. Build it with us understanding what has been done wrong somewhere else and be able to to change in going forward. The only thing that Africa should not do as a whole right now is not play the wrong role in this fourth industrial revolution, where we go and not create jobs as we're doing this. In actual fact, create jobs in other countries, not develop skills in this, and that means importing skills from other countries, and not have a long-term legacy in us implementing all of this. We have a lot of plans. The biggest challenge with what they call it with government at the current moment is not the question of whether or not we have the plan to do this or not do it. What we have a problem is we have a need for senior leaders in this space to be able to start guiding programs in the right direction. And the more we can get a momentum in building senior leadership in developing our technology, you're going to find that we have an ability to actually leapfrog, as I said. We have a great opportunity at the current moment to be able to do it right.
Okay, and then I suppose the question then is, how do we do it right? Because particularly what we have seen in the past is when there has been technological innovation by way of transport, it has been greeted with resistance from established players. We saw what happened when Uber came to market and the chaos that ensued with the meter taxi drivers. We also know that the taxi industry currently transports the majority of our people. So I suppose an understanding from the panel as to how established players and established modes of transport actually fit into the future of smart mobility. The taxi industry, especially, perhaps Dr. Mokonyama, you can kick us off here.
Yes, Fifi. I want to touch again on this issue of a social compact. Agreeing with society on what best defines quality of life. And it needs to be defined in very simple terms, outcomes, to say we do not want you to pay more than, say, 50 cents a kilometer for travel, right? We do not want you to travel at a speed lower than 40 kilometers per hour. Currently, you are traveling at 10 kilometers per hour in the peak. Where you have a scheduled service, we don't want you to wait or to have non-reliability or of more than 1% or whatever number that we agree on. In terms of information availability, you say information about services, about opportunities that are available in space will be available within this kind of reach. So you want to define to unpack it in such simple terms, such that a ward councillor in some place in the West End or wherever in the province, to be able to defend that, to say the reason why we are adopting this trajectory is to come out with these outcomes. Without that social compact, without that unpacking and simplifying the explanation, it will always be, oh, this is what you want to do because you want to just, look good. I mean, we've seen it in France. The high-speed rail network, they are being accused of, just wanting to look good. But because there is that social compact to say, this is what we want as society, is being defended, by society. So unless we define and unpack in very simple terms, outcomes, based, explanations, we will always be stuck trying to defend something that should actually be defended by the communities themselves.
Okay, but let's just stick with the taxi industry still. So, Doctor, so we established the social compact and we explained why we have to move in this direction. I mean, if we are to remain a competitive city, it's not a choice. But naturally, you're greeted then with the question from the industry as to where do I fit in? I mean, if we now have to move in a direction where we are taking a lot more cars off the road as a result of the harm harm that it's doing to the environment, and also as a result of the ease of travel for many commuters in an integrated system. You know, my uncle, for instance, who happens to be a taxi driver right now at this stage, and is asking, how do I fit into that broader plan? Will there still be jobs for me in this plan? What is the response then under this social compact? And perhaps Tembani, if you'd like to weigh in here.
Hello, Fifi again. Yes, I would say I think initially the problem isn't the taxi industry. The problem is there's just too many private vehicles on the roads currently. So before we even get to the removing the taxis from the roads, the initial thing is to try and ensure that our current existing public transportation, is it attractive enough for the general public to use? And then from there, you'll start having a situation whereby there's less private vehicles on the road. Because as you notice, mostly on the freeways, you'd find one person or two people in one vehicle at a given time. And then now looking at the taxis, we don't need to necessarily do away with them. Because if you look at their spatial network currently, for most people, if you want to travel anywhere in the city of Johannesburg, you know if you get into a taxi, you'll be able to get to your destination. And with systems like the BRT, the Rea Vaya, it's only currently serving people from the south of Joburg to the CBD, and the Gautrain only takes people from the central CBD upwards, northwards. So I think these minibus taxis should be actually integrated into the future developments. They could act as a feeder system into these larger networks that exist, like the Gautrain.
Mm-hmm. But integrated, and I imagine that, Kevin, you're going to tell me that they cannot be integrated in their current form, given the move that we are seeing globally into the electrification of vehicles. I mean, Tsepo even did a hint at the launch of the electric buses from the Gautrain coming to market soon. So talk to me about a picture for the taxi industry, if we just stay here for one more moment further, in terms of incentivizing perhaps the move in this direction, getting local manufacturers to start manufacturing electric taxis, as it were, and how we get them on board. What incentives here need to be thrown their way?
I think that's directed at me. Okay. Yeah, I think I agree with Tembani. So it's not about doing away with taxis. And I don't think that is the majority of the problem. The majority of the problem is the private cars. What we're going to do is help the taxi industry to transform into this revolutionized state. And one of it is, I mean, if you look into down the line, if we look in 15 or 20 years down the line, we're going to have a problem with combustion engines. So we're going to have to move to other forms like electric and electric charging stations, setting up the infrastructure, put in some sort of incentives for taxi drivers, operators to switch over to the electric now. While we have time, you can implement a stage plan. But I think more important than that, we can give them a good element of connectivity. And I'm talking about the digitalized connectivity. Imagine if we could create a platform where taxi drivers could log into that platform and offer their service. They would not necessarily be sitting for hours waiting for passengers. It would be based on demand. They can become more efficient. And I think once we give them the confidence, and once you take them through this learning process, which is not going to be an easy process, once you take them through this learning process, you can help build the confidence and help them transform their mindset to want to embrace this revolution. So I think that they can fit into it quite nicely. Remember, this smart mobility is about using all modes or all alternate modes of transport, be it bike sharing, be it walking, is also a form of transport. So it's about embracing all of that. And I think the taxi industry can fit in very well. They provide probably the best end-to-end or last mile solution. And they cover something that other countries have different forms to cover. So we will need a main artery like a Gautrain to provide the main links. And the last mile, or to your house, right to your doorstep, can be done through bikes, can be done through taxis. We need it transformed to a sustainable technology, and we need that on a platform that everyone can access. That for me is the change that needs to come. And I think the government should incentivize processes and policies and incentive plans around that. I think we started on the right way, and our president is saying the right thing. He's saying investment in infrastructure. He's saying smart, intelligent technology, digitalization. He's saying green. So the intention is there. We need to put it into some good little programs, and we need to start now so we can reshape it, reorganize it if we need to.
Thanks, Kevin. And it would seem that the intention has been there for quite a while. One of the audience members that are tuned into this webinar is taking us down memory lane and saying that there has indeed been conversations about smart mobility in Gauteng for more than 5 years. Tsapo, just to bring you in here, the question then becomes, when do we see the actual solutions that impact the lives of the people on the ground? These conversations have been happening for a while. There was the integrated digital mobility app. I believe that was launched in 2018. So the ask is, the timelines on actually seeing these plans being materialized.
So Fifi, everything is live. I actually was the creator of that Gauteng on the Move. It was done here in what do they call it, in this building. So at the current moment, we had a bit of a challenge with the, with the data that sits at the back of the app itself. We will be relaunching the app probably in the next 6 months. We're completely rebuilding it into a proper agglomerator. And when we're talking about agglomeration, it's where we bring more data into one place, and the commuter doesn't go to multiple apps to go and look for that type of information. So because we wanted to do that and make a big change and a big leap forward, we've actually managed to do that. And it will be the first, probably the second one, because the first app came out like that, with you being able to see all taxi services. They were not live at that point in time. You could be able to see taxi ranks, taxi routes, and everything else that you need behind the minibus taxis themselves. But the new agglomerator itself, we want to get it to be live. You'll be able to see all modes of transport and be able to see where they are. But for you to be able to do that, you need a lot of sensors in a lot of vehicles in and around the province itself. The challenge you have is, how do you create an industry out of this? And the slowing down has been in and around us building a job creation plan. And the job creation plan was, if I was going to spend 1.3 billion rand in bringing all the smart mobility, it would not make sense for me to go and acquire everything out of China or even anywhere else in the world. And therefore, we were then asked to be able to hold back and then build a job creation plan. And a job creation plan that actually is going to come up handy now with the current carnage in the industries that has been brought in by COVID-19. But talking about integration, and I want to go back to the question you've been asking to the panels about the integrating of taxi minibus industry into the system itself. We've done it as Gautrain. If you go to Marlborough Station, you don't find any buses there. None of our buses operate there. Those taxis or minibuses are actually operated by the taxi industry themselves. And one thing guaranteed, everybody wants to improve. And they've made a big effort to actually be able to set themselves up properly commercially, and then also to be able to run a very clean and capable business. And from then, we then rolled it out to Centurion, to Hatfield, and we will be going to Rosebank, going down to Park, as part of what we refer to as unlocking the South. And we've taken a key decision, as what they call it, as the Gautrain, that none of our new services in being able to provide last mile services will be done by bus. We will all do it through these minibuses and contract the taxi association into the work that we do. And it's about you leveraging what you have to be able to create jobs and create better jobs, jobs that are sustainable and can actually long-term help what Dr. Mateta was talking about. How do you create that social contract? You create it by making it work. There is nothing impossible in working with the taxi industry. And right now, they are actually the best players we have as part of the Gautrain system.
We've got quite a number of questions that are coming through from the audience, which is great. Tsepo, just briefly, before I move on to the other speakers and get some more insights from them, the overall smart mobility projects of the Gautrain, there's a question as to exactly how much are you investing here?
So in the province as a whole, for us to be able to create a transport management center, get the integrated ticketing in, get the smart apps and integrated, we had probably about 2 years back in the blueprint that has been created, valued it in and about 1.1 billion rands of what we need. Because the biggest challenge is upgrading a lot of our infrastructure to be able to bring the smartness, bring sensors into our roads, bring variable messaging services all around, bring lay fiber that will interconnect all the roads that you have, and also create the backbone for the telecommunication system. So we're building from scratch, and that is one of our biggest challenges. But what we've started to do is for you to be able to see the outcomes of that integrated ticketing. So we've already implemented account-based ticketing on Gautrain alone, which was the initial pilot phase of the integrated ticketing. So at the current moment, you're actually able to use a Rea Vaya, an Arieng, and a Harambe ticket on the Gautrain Vegas. But you can also use your credit card or any Europay or MasterCard or Visa card or a prepaid debit card that to be able to access the system without you having to buy a ticket from us. So you're already starting to see the fruit of the initial part of that smartness.
Okay, and lastly, on the plan to electrify the buses, there's I suppose, an obvious question regarding the high level of load shedding that we are experiencing in the country and whether this is going to impact on the commuter experience. Is it going to result in a high rate of stoppages, perhaps, or is there a plan that the Gautrain has to navigate this?
No. We're going truly green. We will be installing solar panels and creating microgrids within our stations that will get our stations to be off the network and also to charge our buses themselves. But the buses we've bought, the range of them is 270 kilometers. So they can actually, and generally a lot of our buses run in and around the 200 kilometer mark per day. So on a single charge, you will be able to do the entire service for a day. So it is not something that we took lightly. It was one of our big considerations. And initially we were going to add more stacks on it and more battery life to be able to allow it to go 500. But we found that would have been sunk costs that we do not need. Because our buses don't have that much cycling. They actually only achieve 200 kilometers a day. So in essence, you will not experience any stoppages and there will be no need for what they call it. And in actual fact, you're going to get much more efficiency because a lot of the buses, the diesel engine in itself in buses is not one of the most reliable things in the world. As it gets older, it becomes a big problem. So it is a big push for us to get to electrical because we want to reduce our cost and reduce the amount of breakages.
All right. The solutions that are being discussed currently won't come from the public sector or the large multinationals. This is a view of one of the viewers who is asking that where are the local technology companies? And perhaps, Timbani, if I ask you this question as to how should they be supported through these initiatives? How should and how can we get a lot more local innovators a part of the smart mobility drive, in your view?
As my fellow panelists have spoken before, I think the way forward is just sharing information more widely. Because if you see for us, like for example, the University of Johannesburg, whenever we conduct research, we need access to information that is data, is it travel patterns, is it the routes? So I think we now need to get to a stage whereby information is more shared more openly, having more open source data, and also just having more collaboration. For example, I can tell you with the Gautrain, we've had a number of research done at master's level, And thanks to the data which they've unveiled, we've had a couple of graduates which have managed to pass and get distinctions. And also with that, we've managed to create little small apps that actually help commuters to travel.
Okay. Kevin, there is a question for you, just picking up on your point regarding the fact that many cities will stop using combustion engines by 2025. And with the current pace that we are moving at, which you have said that it's not keeping up pace with, some of our global counterparts, is there a risk then, Kevin, of Africa becoming a dumping ground of second-hand CO2 polluting vehicles, in your view?
Well, I can't say for sure that there is a risk, but if you're looking at the trend, and it's starting already, like we said, in 2025, going up to about 2040, when big markets like UK and France will also stop using combustion engines. I think if you look at some of the statistics, you will see in 2015, combustion engines were about 98% of the market. And in 2037, somewhere 2040, it's going to go down to be only 40%, 45% of the market. So it's going to shrink by half. We will definitely stand the risk of that. If we are not progressing like the world, we will stand the risk of that. And that is my biggest point. We don't want to sit back as Africa and always be a dumping ground, which what it was historically. We have a good chance to change it. And like Tsepo said, it's an opportunity to look at it and leapfrog. We are in investment cycles and we can leapfrog. So to avoid that, we have to forecast what's going to happen, put out a plan, do the transformational changes that we need in terms of, like you mentioned, the taxi industry, to support them to get on par with this, so we can, do it in a nice staged approach. If it doesn't happen, think logically what will happen. You will have markets like the first world markets, or the European markets, for example. They change out of combustion engines. What will they do? They will sell that at better prices, better offers to other markets who need to purchase it. And they're not going to just kill it and have a massive loss from it. So you don't want to fall prey to that. And that's the biggest advice I can give from a technology investment here, is you put money down for what's valuable in the future. And that's where the smart mobility concept comes in, investing in all the smart technologies, exactly what Tsepo is talking about on the Gautrain. And that's probably our best example here in South Africa.
Dr. Mukanyama, just to stay on the issue of the money and the investment aspects of it, I mean, we are coming from another plan. As Tsepo did say, we've got a lot of plans in South Africa, and we just got served with another one just last week regarding our economic and reconstruction out of the carnage that has been brought forward by COVID-19. And do you think that plan and perhaps the details of the plan that the finance minister will provide can at this stage allocate sufficient funding to the move towards smarter mobility?
Right, funding will always be that question mark at the end of the discussions, to say all of the things we agree, but where's the money going to come from? If you look at the likes of Kenya, Nairobi, right? Let's start with minibus taxis. They have these programs or savings associations. They call them SACCOs, savings and credit cooperatives. Part of being smart is about smart financing, and part of involving the communities around means that the communities can definitely invest in those initiatives. And we see it in Kenya, Nairobi, where these SACCOs, these cooperatives that the operators, taxi operators have formed, they say we're going to pay drivers full salaries, everybody that works, in ranks, full salaries, but we're going to invest in technology that monitors performance. We are going to also invest in recapitalization so that we don't have to borrow. We're also going to invest in, savings that members can borrow from. essentially empowering the communities. So the communities are actually the investors. And it can go beyond just selling of seats. It can be, property, where this, services operate. So we've got to be smart about that. And we can certainly do that. If you look at the stock fails, I mean, the value, the report that was released, I think last year, evaluating stock fails, it says stock fails is a 50 billion rand, industry, if you want to call it that. That is a lot of money that communities have, and that is just, basics. Communities need to be given an opportunity to invest in these schemes, but they have to believe in them. There's got to be a lot of social capital involved in this thing. And of course, in addition to that, there is public sector money that needs to be efficiently, spent. It's not like there's no money. There's quite a lot of money that has been sitting there being returned every year to National Treasury unspent. So we need to, capacitate our, our institutions to be able to spend that money a bit more efficiently as well.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. And then just staying with you, Dr. Mukwanyama, and talking about the social compact that will help the integration process of our transport networks. There's a question as to what degree do you think that legislation and regulation could help better coordinate this integration?
Yeah, we have a lot of legislation, right? But a lot of it is very prescriptive. It mutes innovation. We need performance-based standards in how we specify our regulations. In fact, at the CSIR, we've been exploring this with the design of trucks, large vehicles, even buses, to say you don't need to be prescriptive in the design. You just need to say it needs to perform in this way, and therefore you need to then be innovative in how you achieve those. So we need to be innovative in how we specify our legislation, our standards, and in that way we then create space for innovation, because by specifying exactly, it means that you know exactly what you want, but often you don't, and the market can actually come through with better solutions. In fact, inefficiencies can be removed by allowing the market to come up with much better solutions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, Kevin, just to get your viewpoint here, I don't know if you've got anything to add regarding the funding aspect. Looking at the kind of funding that we are seeing globally that is being poured into companies that are well positioned for the future, and I just wonder if perhaps we could receive that same vote of confidence here in our transport sector. But perhaps as you also comment on the funding aspect, you did raise a point around the smart mobility startup apps that could perhaps be developed to better integrate the taxi industry, or make the taxi industry a lot smarter. I mean, what are the steps that could help more of these apps come to flight in your view?
Yeah, I think I'm going to come back to one of the other questions that were also asked. Is this going to be done by big companies, global companies, small, medium companies, local companies? The answer is there's a space for everyone to operate and contribute here. And we can use a lot of the global learnings already. We don't have to go through that learning curve again, and we can improve it. And what we do extremely well as a country, and I tell you, this is on a global scale, we receive these compliments, is we're able to take something and localize it to our environment like you cannot believe. And we're able to grow, and we're able to train people locally in our own style. So they're more flexible, they're more adaptable, and all of that. And certainly from an engineering perspective, we have proven cases on this, on very good technologies where we're able to do that. I think we can do the same thing with things like apps that need to be developed. So all you need is the main platform. Then Tepo talks about these APIs. And then you have a lot of localized people that can do localized applications, because nobody is going to understand the taxi industry from other places in the world. As South Africans, we're going to understand it best. And that solution is going to work very well in other African countries. Similarly, we can take systems that work well in other countries, bring it here and adapt around it. So there's a big space for growth in a market. And the markets that we are looking at, where we're talking about it, if I'm looking at one of the stats I've got on, for example, global car sharing market, it was 2.5 billion US dollars in 2019. It's growing at a compound annual growth rate of 24%. We're not tapping into the future sufficiently. I think that comes with the training base, it comes with opportunities, it comes with fair processes that are available for everyone to do something in it. Regarding the issue of funding, the biggest debate that's happening now is after governments are putting out all these packages and these rescue and these investment packages, the question they're asking is, are we investing right in the future? Not now, are we investing right in the future? And that's where I think the money is available. I think the money can be available. What we need is for it to be directed in the right way, and we need it to be spread. I agree. We don't want to create jobs in China or Germany or France. This is jobs that should be created here. But surely, as a nation, we can do this and break this up and allow that flow through to go to all these areas. And I think the last point on it, international agencies, international funding agencies are mainly requiring this sustainable technology. This is becoming a prerequisite for funding. In some countries, it's already in the Europeanized worlds, for example, and it will become an issue for us. So if South Africa is not doing it and someone like Kenya jumps onto that bandwagon, we cannot compete for that funding effectively. We don't have a choice. We need to make that change.
Certainly. Just going into closing comments, my goodness, the time is certainly moving a lot faster than perhaps our move towards a more smarter and mobile city is. Tepo, I asked you this question, in fact, when we were preparing for this discussion, and it was a question around cost. I'm not too surprised that it has come up also from a commuter point of view. Given the ongoing perception that, with the Gautrain being highly subsidized, it's not affordable for the masses. Now we're talking smart mobility and these fancy electric buses and all the like. What does that then mean for costs for your average commuter?
Thank you, Fifi. First is we must be careful not to have the wrong conversation, and that is about, when you're saying highly subsidized, is we need to be able to be aware that some of the modes are wrongly funded, so they are underfunded. The reason why they are incapable of being able to recover from what has happened to them during the COVID-19 saga and the pilfering of all the infrastructure that was there, it's because the place is not set up properly and it does not have enough money. Now, we need to be careful with that and in talking about that. But talking about pricing of services, so what we have attempted to do now during COVID was us launching a student product, and we're still appealing to a lot of students who are actually committing to universities and are going to school at the current moment to join our pilot with us testing the student product that we've just launched. So it's not something we are agnostic of or not really wanting to deal with. It's just that we needed to find the right way to be able to do this sort of a thing. And I think with our latest technology update on our fare ticket system, we're able to develop more and more products to be able to accommodate different levels of society. So the next product we're going to be launching is the product for the retired folk or for the elderly, and slowly we will be looking at how do we integrate everybody into the system. But one of the things that we had to answer to, this morning we had a national portfolio committee for transport discussion in and around the regulation of transport as a whole, and what we raised with was, do not forget that for us to be able to maintain the system the way we do, it actually costs money. And that money partially is recovered from the fares and then partially is recovered from the subsidy itself. So you have to be careful not to have the wrong conversation by simply saying the subsidy is too high. It's too high based on what? The base you are counting from is actually below par. And therefore, it is those subsidies that need to be brought up so that places like PRASA could actually operate properly at the right level and be able to operate the manner in which first world countries operate in and around metro systems like that, rather than trying to bring down the Gautrain subsidy and then end up with it looking exactly like the setup you have in PRASA.
Right, right. Thanks there, Tepo. Gentlemen, I have been told I have got 3 minutes to share between you, so I'm hoping that you will be able to sum up your closing comments regarding this topic of smart mobility in a minute each. And, beginning with you, Thembani, certainly so that this time next year, when we perhaps meet and have this conversation, we are tracking more inroads that we have made in the space rather than the steps that we've taken backwards.
Thank you, Fifi. I think just closing words, I think for us as the research community, the biggest issue for us to actually also partake in this move for smart mobility is open source data. And then once we've got open source data, we can start also inputting and also allowing the local communities to also share their voice as we start to shape how mobility is done in developing cities.
All right. Open source data. Kevin, final words from you?
I just want to say, I think we have the people, we have the opportunity in country to do it. Let's do the leapfrogging. Let's not wait anymore for invitations and analyze. Let's start this process. We need a champion, we need a policy, and we need a long-term plan. And we build towards it, and with that, we build our industry and create jobs. And if COVID-19 has taught us something, it's you need to do it now.
Exactly, to avoid being caught off guard. Dr. Mokanyama, some final thoughts from yourself?
Thanks, Fifi. Quickly, just to say, being smart is also around having, smart people, informed people. So while we do all of these things, let's take, people along, along with us. So that we don't talk, cross each other. We are on the same page at all times. It takes a bit of skill. So where we require those skills to come through, let's embed them in our institutions so that the communication part of things is improved. You don't have to defend things unnecessarily. So the communication part of it needs to be improved quite drastically. Then we can create quite a bit of momentum forward.
Perfect, gentlemen. Thank you so much for being smart enough to stick to the 1 minute. We are right on track in terms of this conversation that we have been having around smart mobility, as it is a transport month here in South Africa for the month of October. And this is certainly a pertinent conversation that we need to be having to ensure that we advance our economy in the right direction. I would like to thank my guests who have helped drive this conversation, and that is Tepo Khobe, the Chief Operating Officer at the Gauteng Management Agency, Kevin Pillay, the CEO of Siemens Mobility South Africa, Dr. Mateta Mokonyama, the Impact Area Manager for Transport Systems and Operations at the CSIR, and of course, Thembani Moyo from the Faculty of Engineering and the Built Environment Department of Urban and Regional Planning at UJ. And of course, you the viewers, thanks so much for your engagement. We do hope that all your questions were answered, and those that were not, of course, get in touch with us at CNBC Africa, and we can see how we can direct them to the relevant people to get the answers that you require. Thanks so much for watching as always, and have yourselves a fantastic rest of the afternoon from myself and the team here in Johannesburg. It is goodbye for now.